Hi there. I gotta say, it's kind of impressive to have this many parents coming out in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. I was kind of thinking, boy, parent group in the middle of the day, I bet we get 5 or 7. So it's nice to see so many people out. So again, my name is Mike Anderson, and I'm a lifetime educator. I taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades for 15 years. I taught 4th and 5th grades in East Lyme, Connecticut for 6 years, kind of in the southeastern corner of Connecticut. And then I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades for 9 years. And I still live in that area. I live in Durham, New Hampshire, right near the university. So, what was that?
Go Wildcats.
That's right. If you care about hockey, it's a pretty cool place. Yeah. Not so much basketball or football. Well, football's been okay. Football's been all right, yeah.
Friends with the coach.
Nice. So I better be good then. Yeah. So I've also been working as an education consultant now for about 10 years. I worked with a nonprofit organization for 6 years, doing work across the United States and a little bit in Canada. And now for the last 4 years, I've been out on my own as an independent education consultant. And I've been having so much fun coming down to Mountain Brook. I got to come to the Summer Learning Conference 2 Junes ago and do a keynote for the Summer Learning Conference. And then I came back in April and did a few demo lessons at the junior high. Came back and did the Summer Learning Conference again in June. So yesterday I was with Crestline. Tomorrow I'm going to be with Mountain Brook Elementary. Monday I come back down and I'm going to be with Cherokee Bend. And then Tuesday I'm going to be with the high school. So I feel like I should just get an apartment in town, and it's been pretty neat. My wife does not like the heat and humidity, so I don't think we're going to be moving anytime soon. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit today about this idea of promoting a growth mindset. And just so I have a sense of kind of where we're at with that, have people heard at all about that idea of mindset? Have you heard of Carol Dweck's work around growth mindset? I'm seeing some nods and some shakes, so we're kind of a little bit of each. Okay. So I'm going to share a little bit about the big idea of what is a growth mindset so that we all are kind of on the level playing field with that. And then we're going to think specifically about how our language can impact kids' mindsets about themselves as learners. So this is part of the work that I've been doing on this latest book that Nathan was referring to. So my next book is going to be coming out in February. And here's the basic shtick of the book. It is that we all have the best intentions when it comes to working with children. And this book is written for teachers, but I think there are some crossovers where there's, as teachers, we're often parents. As parents, we're teachers. I think there's a lot of overlap. So the book is written specifically for educators, but I think there's language advice in here that fits with parenting too. So the basic idea of the book is we all have positive intentions. We also all have to rely on habits of language. We have to have our go-to phrases that just come out automatically. We have to run on autopilot because we can't pre-think everything we're going to say in the moment all of the time. We would go insane. There's just too much happening. So we've got best intentions. We all have to rely on language habits. And we all end up in habits that run counter to our best intentions. We just do. I know that I do. I'm still working on some language habits as a teacher and as a parent. Here's an example, it's kind of a teacher example. Teachers will say that they want kids to own the work. And I often hear this at middle school and high schools. Teachers will say, oh, I just wish the kids cared about the work. I don't want them just working for me. I don't just want them working for a grade. I want them to care about their work. I want them to have ownership of their work. But then teachers are very likely to say to kids, okay, everybody, here are the 3 things you're going to do for me in this next piece of work. Did you hear that? The 3 things you're going to do for me in the next piece of work. Or a teacher might say, looking at my grade book here, some of you still owe me some work from last week. So on the one hand, teachers are saying we want kids to own the work, but then we're using language habits that actually indicate that it's the teachers who own the work and the kids are doing the teacher's work for them. So that's just one example of that mismatch. So the way the book is broken down, so there are a whole bunch of different categories. So each of the chapters of the book kind of plays with one of these mismatches, and one of these mismatches has to do with growth and learning. I think we would all say we want our kids to see themselves as learners. We want kids to have a growth mindset, which means that they believe that hard work and effort are the keys to success, not just sort of natural inborn talent. And yet we probably all end up in language habits that are going in the reverse direction. Okay. So here's the basic idea behind a growth mindset. And this comes out of the work of Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist at Stanford. And she has been doing over 4 decades of research and work into this idea that she now calls a growth mindset. It is that you understand that hard work and effort are the keys to improving your intelligence, to getting smarter. So it's the understanding that intelligence is not a fixed trait, like your eye color or your height, that you can actually get smarter by doing certain things, just like you can get stronger through exercise. And that is scientifically proven, by the way. In fact, we often think of the IQ test as a measure of fixed intelligence, but Alfred Binet, the one who invented the IQ test, had a growth mindset and actually viewed the IQ test as a way of understanding what Parisian school children were struggling with in school so that teachers would better be able to help them learn and grow in the areas they were struggling with. He never meant the IQ test to be the standardized test to measure intelligence. And it's also been shown that IQ varies over time. It can go up and go down. Okay. We also want kids to feel empowered as learners. We want them to understand that they can grow, and through hard work and effort, they're gonna see success. And we want kids to have this sense of wanting to take on challenges, that growth and learning is fun, and that means we gotta take on hard things and stick with them, and that's how you get smarter. So in just a minute, just in half a minute, we're gonna watch a couple of short videos that'll help you better understand a little bit about growth mindset, as well as the relationship between praise and mindset. And that's one of the things we're really going to dig into today. Because one of the mistakes we may make with our language is we may praise children for their talents and abilities. We may say things like, "You are such a great writer. Oh, you're so smart." And when we praise kids in that way, we give them the idea that you're either smart or you're not. And that can often get them locked up and worried about making mistakes. We're going to watch this first video now, and this one specifically is about the relationship between mindsets and praise. And I think it makes a couple of really interesting points and talks a little bit about Carol Dweck's research.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy non-verbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must be really smart at this." Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must have worked really hard at this." Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first and you will surely do well on it. Now the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
The child or adult hears, "Oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation." As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, "Oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented." They think, "Oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with, so teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put forth. I think this is a pretty easy fix that will help us develop growth mindsets within the kids that we work with. And as all the research shows, having a growth mindset has a big time impact on the development of a child, whether it's on the court, in the classroom, or just in life. Thanks so much for following along and watching this video. For more like this, visit championshipbasketballschool.com and click on the championship newsletter. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
So in the book Mindset that Carol Dweck wrote about some of this research, she actually tells a little bit more about that study. There was another piece that they did, which is they would invite the kids to write letters about how they did on the test and telling other kids about the test. They'd write those letters and then the idea was they would send them off to other kids. She said 40% of the kids who'd been praised for their intelligence lied about their test scores and said that they got higher scores than they actually got. So in the book, Carol Dweck actually says that one piece of fixed mindset praise not only decreased their achievement, but it turned them into liars. It's the way she says it in the book. You read that, you're like, oh my gosh. So we're now going to watch another short video, and then you'll get a chance to turn and talk. This one shows a little bit of that research study in action. So you'll see some grad students administering the test, and you'll hear a little bit more from Carol Dweck about that piece of research.
We took fifth graders. We give them puzzles to solve.
So you see these blocks? Can you tell me what color is on that side?
Red, yellow, white, blue.
All right, so what I want you to do is put these blocks together so that the picture on top matches the picture here, all right?
First, we give children a set of easier puzzles to do.
Now here's the next one.
When these 9 and 10-year-olds successfully put together the puzzle, the children are praised for either their intelligence
Wow, you did really well. You must be really smart at these.
or the effort they made.
Wow, you did really well. You must have tried really hard at these.
Then we give them a much harder set of problems, ones that they might, in fact, struggle with.
Here's the next one.
And we see what happens to their confidence. Do they think, oh, this means I'm not good at it after all? Do they stop liking the puzzles? Or do they maintain their confidence and think, well, it just needs more effort or strategies? What happens to their motivation?
Are you ready to go on?
Ta-da! We also ask them, well, which problems do you want to work on some more? Those easier ones or those harder ones? And generally we find that kids who have been praised for their intelligence really want to go back to those easier ones that were their claim to fame.
This is a sign of a fixed mindset, the belief that intelligence is innate and can't be changed.
What we found was that children thought that difficulty meant they weren't smart or they weren't good at the task.
So you seem to have more trouble with this one, and I want to know why you think that was.
Probably because I'm not good at these problems.
A very discouraging conclusion.
Other children show a growth mindset.
The growth mindset is like this. No matter who you are, you can always become a great deal smarter. They feel smart when they're working really hard on something difficult and making progress.
So if I gave you some more problems, would you like more problems like these that are pretty easy so you'll do well, or problems like these that'll be hard but you might learn a lot from them?
These.
More like these?
Students praised for effort generally want those hard ones that they can learn from. What I've learned from my research is that kids, and I think adults too, are exquisitely sensitive to what's going on in a situation, what other people value, what they're being judged on. What is that voice in our head saying? Is it saying fixed mindset things like, oh, you better not make a mistake, you better look smart, people are judging you? Or is it saying growth mindset things? Here's an opportunity, here's a mistake I can learn from. I feel smart when I do something difficult.
So I wish we had more time to really dig into this. I want to share a few ideas with you, some language shifts we might consider, and then we're going to play around in practice with a few examples. So here are just a couple of ideas to keep in mind if you were thinking about maybe trying to play around with your language. One thing we might do ourselves is work at modeling a growth mindset. I think oftentimes we accidentally model a fixed mindset when we talk about ourselves in self-deprecating negative ways. Oh, I can't play the trumpet to save my life. I don't have a musical bone in my body, we might say. Or, oh, I can't draw my way out of a paper bag. I'm not an artist. Carol Dweck is really clear in her research. We almost all have a fixed mindset about ourselves in some aspect of our lives and a growth mindset about ourselves in others. So we might think of ourselves in terms of a fixed mindset as an artist or a writer, but in growth mindset in terms of physical ability or math. So when we say things like, oh, I've never been good at math, I can't do math, we're accidentally modeling a fixed mindset that you've got the math gene or you don't. And you all know there's no such thing as a math gene, right? That's a made up thing. One of Carol Dweck's colleagues at Stanford, Joe Bowler, is doing some amazing work on mathematics instruction in the United States. She contends that 95% of all American kids should be able to excel in calculus in high school. But it's the way we teach math and the way we talk about math that gets kids into fixed mindsets about themselves in math and puts up all of these barriers that make it almost impossible for us to learn. Timed tests is a classic example. You know, being able to do math facts quickly. When kids can't do that, they think they're not good at math. When in fact, memorizing math facts isn't really mathematical thought, it's memorization. So that's just one example. So we can model a growth mindset, and we can still be self-deprecating. We might say, instead of I can't draw my weight off a paper bag, I would have to work so hard at drawing to be good at that. So we're still being a little self-deprecating, but in a growth mindset way. Instead of offering judgmental feedback, you're so awesome, that's so great, instead we might offer descriptive feedback. Wow, I noticed that's the longest story you've ever written. How did you think of all those ideas? Instead of, you're such a great writer. I mean, think about the pressure. If somebody has praised you as being a great writer, and now it's about time to take on the new writing task, might you be a little bit nervous about not being a great writer if your second piece isn't as good as your first one? So instead, we might talk about the attributes of the work, offer descriptive feedback instead of judgmental praise. I think we can also reconsider how we encourage hard work. I think oftentimes we say things that are unrealistic to kids. You know, like, try your best. How many of us have said that? Are you willing to rat yourselves out? We all have, probably. So you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with saying try your best? Don't we all want to try our best? I think it's actually not a helpful piece of encouragement because I'm not sure we can ever actually do it. So I'm working as a runner right now. I've got a running goal in a 5K that is a definite stretch, especially for a 47-year-old. And so I came pretty close recently in a race. I got within 40 seconds of my goal time. I worked so hard. At the end, I could barely stand up. My knees were shaking. I couldn't hold onto the water bottle. I was working really hard at not throwing up. I took it out a little too fast in the beginning of the race, and so by the end, I was just bonking, just exhausted. So did I try my best? Was that my best effort? If a tiger had jumped out of the bushes in the last 100 yards, I might have found an extra couple of seconds. So this whole idea of, try your best, I think that for kids who are already bordering on some anxiety, that might put this extra pressure on. And for kids who are thinking, I'm not going to try my best, I'm not sure it's helpful. And then sometimes we even layer it on and we say things like, oh, don't worry, just try your best. Like it's not a big deal to try your best. Oh, it's okay, if you just try your best, then everything's going to be okay. Well, instead we might offer feedback that feels a little more realistic. This is a time to put in some really hard effort. This is a time to really work hard. See if you can go out there and make some mistakes and find some ways that you can grow and learn from mistakes. That might be a way to offer encouragement without these sort of overwhelming, bland, generic, just try your best. And I think we can also encourage kids to do more of the reflecting. I think sometimes as parents or as teachers, we feel like it's our job to always be going around telling all the kids how we think they're doing. It means we're always judging kids. And think about how that feels if somebody is always judging you. Maybe instead we could say, what do you think? Did you like the story that you wrote? What are some things about the story that you like? Or what's something that you enjoy about this piece of artwork you did? And when we encourage kids to self-reflect and we help them think about themselves as learners, it allows us to step back a little bit and not be quite so judgy. So let's just play around with a couple of examples. All right, so I already gave this example. I can't draw my way out of a paper bag. Instead, we might say, boy, drawing is something I'd really have to work at if I was going to get better at that. So let's play with another one. Let's say that your kid brings home a science project and they're excited about it and they come up and say, look at my science project. How might you offer them some feedback that might be more descriptive than just saying, awesome job? So we might say, wow, look at all the detail you put in. Boy, you've really put a lot of effort into both the project and the poster. That would be a way to be a little more descriptive. I think sometimes people worry that if we say, let's not praise kids for smarts, they're going to think, well, I think sometimes people worried kids are going to think we're not going to love them anymore. If we're not always praising them, does that mean that they don't like us? And one of the things I've really been emphasizing with teachers, especially in these last 2 days as I've been working with teachers in a couple of schools, is we can show love and affection in lots and lots of ways. I think we want to be careful, though, about making the love and affection feel like it's contingent on their behavior. If you do a great science project, then I'm proud of you. If you behave well, then I'm pleased with your behavior and pleased with you. I think that there's a danger there. Because now if kids get more of our love and affection when they're doing what they should, and then they have a bad day, does that mean we love them less?
Yeah. So will you talk more about that? Because I was actually thinking through some of that as watching the video and thinking, I don't want to over-rotate towards praising hard work, because there may be times that my kids, for whatever reason, they're tapped out.
Yes.
And I still want them to know that they are valued and have worth. And I'd love to hear anything else.
Yes, and Carol Dweck has really come out. So the book that she wrote made a huge splash in the education community. And then there's been a little bit of backlash. There have been some people who've pushed back against some of the things she said. And one of the things she's had to come out and be really clear about is we can't just substitute good effort for good job. That was an oversimplification of her research. People just said, oh, okay, I know how to do this. Instead of saying, great job, we say, great effort. Well, it turns out that that's not what Carol Dweck's really talking about. So we want to be careful about just making that substitution. There are plenty of times when kids don't put in great effort. And I would actually argue there are plenty of times when we shouldn't put in maximum effort. I think that's another way we often go astray, is we tell kids you should always be trying your best. Oh my gosh, what kind of pressure is that? I mean, am I trying my best right now as a speaker? I don't know. I'm engaged. I'm working hard. I'm reading your eyes and faces and trying to think about what to say next. Are you absolutely trying your best right now as participants? is that even, do we care about that? Or is it just that we want to be engaged and enjoy cool work together? And so I think that we can also think about how we just don't always have to judge. We can talk with kids about what they're doing without feeling like we have to tell them how they're doing all the time.
Going on the other side of that, so do you point out, they come in with their science project and they did not do well on it, and you know it's because they didn't put the effort in, what is it that you're supposed to say? Well, you didn't do a good job. You know, it's like the opposite of praise. It's a negative connotation associated with it. Well, you didn't work hard, or, you know, like that, what it should say on the flip side.
Yeah, I guess it's going to depend on the context. I mean, if the kid comes up with a crummy project and says, look at my project, do you like it? That's a time when I might say, tell me what you think about it. Tell me what you were working on. It could be that they were working on things that we don't even pick up on. Like, I remember when my son was in 9th grade, my son has a really hard time doing homework, like just at all. It's really hard. And he actually did a piece of homework. He was supposed to create a short video about I think it was the revolution in Russia back in the early 1900s. And he and a friend worked for 3 straight hours on this little claymation animation video where a Russian ruler was getting the chair kicked out from under them and they were being hung. They watched YouTube videos to practice a Russian accent. They really worked hard on this and they learned a lot as they were doing it. And in the end, their video looked like it had been done by a couple of 14 or 15-year-olds. Because it had been done by a couple of 14 or 15-year-olds, and it was a little bit too short, and it was a little bumpy, and the feedback they got from the teacher was, C, should have tried harder. Because it didn't look like the projects that maybe some of the parents had done from other kids, because they really were on their own, just, you know? And so when he showed me that, I mean, you could see he was kind of crushed. I said, Ethan, I know you put a lot of work into that. I can see you're pretty upset. He didn't even know how hard I worked on that. I said, have you told him? So I think sometimes we see the project and it's easy to just react. And so instead we might ask the kid, so what did you work on? What was something you learned from this? What was the main idea of the project? And if it's a time when we do need to give them some feedback, we might say, yeah, it looks to me like this isn't your best work. Tape is falling off the edges. There's some misspelled words. If you'd put a little more time and effort into this, you would have had a more polished product. To just say that. All right, how about this one? What might you say to a kid who's done well in math without just that sort of, you're such a brilliant mathematician? Yesterday at Crestline, a teacher made a really interesting observation as we were talking about giving more less judgmental and more reflective feedback. He said, well, I have to admit, part of the reason that I say good job is because it's so easy. And if we're going to give descriptive feedback, we're actually going to have to pay a lot more attention to what kids are doing. And I think there's some real truth there. That good job. It reminds me of, at the end of a baseball game and all the Little League kids line up and they walk by each other, good job. That's sometimes how it feels as adults when we're talking with kids. We don't have to think. We don't know if the kid actually did a good job. We could just say it and then we feel like we can check off the box like, oh yeah, made the kid feel good, check. So part of what we're going to have to do is observe kids much more carefully and really look for the attributes. All right, let me just share a couple others. All right, instead of this, don't worry, try your best. It might be, as you think about this project you're working on, what part do you think you're really going to have to focus on? What might be hard for you, and how could you work on it? And instead of this, yeah, I love your story, it's awesome, we can ask the kid, what's something you enjoy about the story? So these are just a few ideas of ways to think about the language shift. Now, I know that a 30-minute parent talk is probably just enough to have you feeling uncomfortable and like, now what do we do? And changing our language habits is really, really hard. When I was working on the language habit of moving away from saying, I like the way you, as my go-to phrase for how I gave positive feedback, it took me a year or a year and a half of really conscious effort to get over the hump and to finally establish a new language pattern. So there are a couple of resources you might consider. On my website, I actually have a couple of resources about developing a growth mindset. And so you could go and check out a couple of blog articles there. I also highly recommend Carol Dweck's book, just called Mindset. It's a really, really fun, easy read. It's not one that feels like a research dissertation. She really worked at writing a book that would sort of fit into the Malcolm Gladwell, Daniel Pink kind of genre. That's what she was working at. And you could probably read the first 75 or 100 pages and get the idea. So that's a really great resource. And then Carol Dweck has also got some great articles out there that summarize some of her work. So that's something you might check out and consider. Angela Duckworth, she's a researcher out of the University of Pennsylvania. And I got to see her in Boston at a small gathering. And she has a mathematical formula she's created that shows the relationship between effort and talent and success. It is talent times effort equals skill. Skill times effort equals achievement. So talent times effort equals skill. Skill times effort equals achievement. So she tells her own 2 adolescent daughters, talent counts, but effort counts twice. And I love that because I think, and anything times 0 is 0. So if you've got lots of talent and no effort, you don't develop the skill. And so I think that's a really cool, simple math formula that helps highlight the importance of effort over talent. Yes, talent times effort equals skill, and then skill times effort equals achievement. I will say that I've had students with a really wide range of skills and abilities in my own classroom, and I use the same language and habits and patterns for all of the students. And so I remember I had one class where we were doing this awesome research project on conflict in US history. And each kid had chosen their own independent research project that fit within that theme of conflict in US history. And I remember at one table, I had 3 kids who would often sit together. There was Timmy, who was reading my college-level textbooks on Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the 20th Maine Regiment from the Battle of Little Round Top from the Battle of Gettysburg. And he was sitting next to Alyssa Fernandez, who was just kind of this regular old rock star 5th grade kid. And she's reading 4th and 5th grade texts on Rosa Parks and the Civil Rights Movement. And then next to Alyssa was Michael, who had Down syndrome, and it was really struggling with reading and writing, even for somebody with Down syndrome. And he was practicing sentences on sentence strips. He wanted to study rocket ships. And his paraprofessional and I were like, rocket ships? How do we connect this with conflict in US history? So he was studying the space race as part of the Cold War. And so he's practicing sentence strips. Rocket ships go far. Rocket ships go high. Rocket ships go, are tall. So the language, the way I would reinforce or support or encourage hard work and effort with all 3 of those kids, the same. Because we can all grow and we can all learn given where we're at.